In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. Whatever the virtues of the many fields of knowledge, all are steps on the path of omniscience. May these arise in the clear mirror of intellect. O Manjushri, please accomplish this. Good evening and welcome. Tonight we have our last class in the exploration of how do we understand this world that we live in, and how do we bring it onto the path, screaming and kicking. And tonight, let's see, is the end of our second segment of this, which focused on the Yogacara traditions and the synthesis of that with the Madhyamaka tradition and then the Tathagata tradition. And so tonight is our last class of the Tathagata tradition. We have a couple of wonderful texts. The main root text of the last week we had the root text, right? The Tathagata Sutra. And this week we have the most famous sort of condensation of the whole view of Tathagata as provided by Maitreya, the future Buddha, handy text called the Ratnagotra Vibhaga, is sometimes called the analysis of the element of enlightenment. Ratna Gotra, the Ratna is precious, Gotra is the element, and Vibhaga is either analysis or sometimes translated as distinction or differentiation. So I've seen this described two ways. One is like just distinguishing the Ratna from the Vibhaga. Ratna Gotra, distinguishing the jewel from the element, presumably meaning the jewel of enlightenment from the element of the Gotra is like the potential. And we didn't really get into that in this. We've gotten into that complexity in other classes. We've seen this oddity between Tathagata and Gotra. But which is why I favor the translation of like analyzing the element of the enlightened potential, the jewel. And so we have an excerpt from chapter 1 of this wonderful text by Maitreya, the bulk of chapter 1. And then we have a commentary on it by the only Indian extant or known, I think, Indian commentary.
There is a second Indian commentary that we don't have.
Right, that's right. Yeah. Who's that one by? Do you know?
Not off the top of my head. It wasn't a name I was familiar with. But then the Uttara Tantra is also said to be a text that is both by Maitreya and Asanga. That Asanga's Maitreya is responsible for the verse, and Asanga is responsible for the prose. And the version that came down to Tibet, the two were thoroughly mixed together. And Karl Brunholzl, in this book, Where the Clouds Part, has actually distinguished which is the Asanga and which is the Maitreya. So some scholars say that there's the root text actually is an Asanga commentary as well. So in that sense, there can be said to be three commentaries: Asanga's, this other one, and the one that we're going to be reading later by Sajjana.
Yeah, interesting. I thought it was pretty much accepted that Asanga's portion of the text was a commentary. It's interesting that you
Right,
said
right.
it
It,
was
it it
disputed.
it is a commentary, whereas Maitreya is said to be the root text. But the actual text that came to Tibet, those two
At
were
the mixed
thoroughly mixed together, and the parsing them apart was done much later, like centuries later.
need.
Hmm.
I bet Maitreya wasn't too happy about that. Have his legal team talk to Sangha about that. And so what we have here is just Maitreya's part, presumably.
It's both. This translation there, it's both, but they're not really distinguished. That's my understanding, at least.
Yeah. And so Carl must separate them in that book.
That's right.
Ah, we have to check out that book then. Okay, cool. Well, we have what we
I
have.
feel like there's a whole course that should be taught about this text
Oh, totally. Yeah,
rather than this one class we
totally.
can
Such
say.
a beautiful, maybe two classes. It's
Yeah.
such a beautiful
Or
text. So, uh, this text, along with the Dharma Dharmatava Bongo, another one of the five dharmas of Maitreya that we went through earlier on in the course, learned about. So, this text was authored by Maitreya, commented on by Sangha, and then disappeared for many centuries. It was discovered again by Maitripa somewhere like in the 10th century or so, 11th century, 10th century, I guess. It emitted light. It was hidden in a pillar in some monastery, and there was a crack in the pillar. And there was the light coming through. So that's unusual that there would be light coming through a pillar. I didn't know that we had light bulbs in the 10th century, and so forth. Anyway, so this text, like some of other Maitreya texts, like his text on the path, Abhi Samaya Alamkara, the ornament of higher realization, is this deceptively short text that like unpacks into infinite complexity. And this text also has that. It's sort of beautiful, poetic text that has a huge amount of meaning packed into it. Chris, do you want to give any other further introduction before we dive into the root and commentary?
well, just one thing that I think is worth saying is, Derek mentioned that this text was this. Well, so the story goes, this text was appeared maybe sometime in the sixth century or so, um, and uh, and sort of didn't make a splash in the in Indian commentarial tradition. It doesn't really, people aren't writing about it. It's not being referenced in other texts, and then reappears sort of miraculously around the 11th century uh, by Maitripa in this wonderful story. And it would be tempting to think like, okay, yeah, sure, it was written in the 11th century, but a copy of it shows up in China around I think the year 600 or so. So that was translated from India. So it did exist in India, and it's a very curious thing as to why it didn't spawn a commentarial tradition or another tradition altogether in addition to Madhyamaka and Yogacara. One of there was a text by Sadra Foundation that Derek circulated proposing that Tathagata is actually the third Indian Mahayana tradition, distinct from Madhyamaka and Yogacara. We often lump it in with one or the other, but it's interesting to consider it as a third territory, distinct from the other two. So that's all I wanted to say was that it did exist, and why weren't they talking about it? Derek.
Thank you for that, Chris. A couple of things you brought up in there. One is that article, "The History of the Tathagata Garba Tradition," was from Debbie.
Oh,
You
thank you,
know,
Deb.
Frederick passed it to me
Fantastic
and we
article,
shared it.
by the way.
Yeah, yeah, that was great. Thank you for noticing that on that website. I had pointed us to the part of the website that went through the 9 similes and affiliated them with the stages of the path. Um, but the other thing was the dating of it. You said this is from the 6th century, and I think you mean that it can be proved by that Chinese translation to be at least that date. But Sangha is said to have lived like 4th century. So
Right.
um,
Thank you for that.
I think it has to be more in that area if we accept that story of it being authored by Maitreya and Sangha. And as there's writings by Carl where he goes through these 5 dharmas in some detail. I'm not sure if he went through this detail on what we went through in this class, but there wasn't always like this neat package of these 5 dharmas of Maitreya. There were different versions of the Maitreya text that some had less, some were packaged in different ways, attributed to different authors. And so the packaging that we get today is sort of the result of the incrustation of time and tradition. But anyway, let's dive into the content of it. And I'm pretty much going to read through it quickly and see how far we get. We're on 334 of the source book. That out. So all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. First chapter is called Tathagata, and the chapters, unlike many texts, are actually named in the text itself. If condensed, the body of the entire commentary consists of the following 7 Vajra points. So it's unclear here whether the term commentary refers to Sangha's commentary on Maitreya's text, or does that mean that this text is basically a commentary on the entire teachings of the Dharma of the Buddha, which is my way of understanding this? It consists of these following 7 Vajra points, which ends up having this sort of very deep significance, the organization of these topics. The Buddha, Dharma, and the assembly, the 3 refuges, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, the element being described as Tathagata Garbha in this case, and enlightenment, awakening, the qualities of awakening or Buddhahood. So enlightenment is Buddhahood, the qualities of Buddhahood, and then the Buddha activity. So it turns out that this sort of hangs together as like the element is like the middle, most important topic in the text. And the first 3 sort of lean on one side of it as like the progression to awakening. And then the next 3 sort of are organized in terms of what flows out from the element. So, but we'll see different ways that that's unpacked in the above order, which presents them in a logical sequence. These should be known to be derived. So it gives the source, this sutra by King Dharanishwara, and the Arst. I hope you enjoyed this typographical error, at least in my version of it. It's from the PDF, didn't translate properly into Adobe. And what is given here as a long capital A is in fact the letters F and I. Very funny. There's one place where it gives a very rude sort of result. But anyway, here we have the first, A being FI. The first 3 of the topic stem from its introductory chapter and so forth. Skipping to the next, from the Buddha stems the Dharma. So from the Buddha's enlightenment, he then proceeds to share his experience and understanding, which becomes the Dharma. So we have the enlightenment of the Buddha is the very first thing. And then the explanation of that experience is the Dharma. And then those who receive and undertake the attempt to experience that are the Sangha. And then we have the attainment of Buddha nature, the element of primordial wisdom. From the assembly, we then have the attainment of Buddha nature, the element of primordial wisdom. The wisdom finally attained is so finally, not anally. This wisdom finally attained the supreme enlightenment, the powers, and so on. So that's the remaining three topics. So Buddha Dharma Sangha, the element, then the element of primordial wisdom to target the garment. The wisdom finally attained is the enlightenment, and then the qualities and the activity are the powers, and so on. Thus possessing the properties that fulfill, F-I-L-L, the benefit of all sentient. First three Vajra points, the three jewels. The Buddha is without beginning, middle, or end. So here we have a description in a very beautiful, ultimate way, like really one of the it is looked to as like the pinnacle of the presentation of the Mahayana view, and just has an amazing presentation of the three refuges, the three jewels. It's without beginning or middle or end. The Buddha is the absolute, the ultimate. He is peace itself. The word, the pronoun is a little bit questionable, one way or another. Fully awakened, self-expanded in Buddhahood. Having reached this state, Buddha shows the indestructible permanent path, the Dharma, so that those who have no realization may realize. And wielding the supreme sword and Vajra of knowledge and compassionate love, he cuts the seedling of suffering and destroys the walls of doubt, along with its surrounding thickets of various views. So there is the accomplishment, the reality of this enlightened state. And from that flows the expression of wisdom and compassion, which together create the skillful means leading others on the path. I bow down to this Buddha being uncreated, yet spontaneously present, contradictorily, not a realization due to extraneous conditions. It's not something that's brought about externally. Wielding knowledge, compassionate love, and ability. So the three qualities of Buddha. These are the three main aspects of complete Buddhahood: knowledge, wisdom, compassion, and ability or capability or power. Buddhahood has the qualities of the two benefits of oneself and others. The true nature of reality is without beginning, middle, or end. Hence, the state of Buddha is uncreated. So now it feels like this is maybe a Sangha's commentary on that root verse by Maitreya. It's going to unpack that 4-line stanza. So first we have the description of uncreated, being without beginning, middle, or end. The Buddha is uncreated since it possesses the peaceful Dharmakaya. And the translation of the term as possesses is a little bit odd. It's more like, since it is the peaceful Dharmakaya, it is described as being spontaneously present, because it's not a complete void. There's a kaya, there's a Dharmakaya. Since it must be realized, or is realized through, or is only realized through self-awareness, it is not brought about by extraneous or external or any other conditions other than itself. These three aspects being realized, there is knowledge. So wisdom is understanding these three aspects of an enlightened nature. Since the path is shown, there is compassionate love. So because the Buddha shows the path, that's the demonstration that their enlightenment is the embodiment of compassionate love, and their ability, since the poisons, defilements, and suffering are relinquished by these two, wisdom and compassion. Through the first three, there is benefit for oneself. Through the latter three, there is benefit for others. So, through the first three of being uncreated, spontaneously present, and self-realized, there is the benefit for oneself. And through the latter three of being wisdom, compassion, and ability, there's the benefit for others. The Dharma is neither existent nor non-existent, both or neither, and so forth. So beyond the four extremes, it is inaccessible to such investigation in the sort of an investigation that tries to pin it down as this or that, existent or non-existent, and so forth. It cannot be defined. It is self-aware in peace. The Dharma is without defilement, holding the brilliant light rays of primordial wisdom. It fully defeats attachment, aversion, and dull indifference, the three root poisons, with regard to all objects of perception. Normally, that's Blessed described as all objects of knowledge. I bow down to this Son of the sacred, inconceivable, free from the two veils. The veils are obscures enlightenment. Anyone? The two veils. The long dark veil, and then there's the short white veil. No, the two veils are Klesha Varna and Johnny. Klesha Varna, the veil of kleshas and the veil of ignorance. The two veils, and from thought. Interesting. So free from the two veils and from thought, being pure, clear, and playing the part of an antidote. That line is a little unclear to me. Is it free from thought? Sounds right. It's beyond thought.
It's odd that thought would be distinguished from the two veils, in particular the second.
It is. It's like, what else do you need? Why do you need that, right?
Yeah.
And then being pure, clear, and playing the part of an antidote. It is free from attachment and frees one from attachment. This is the Dharma with its features of the two truths, the reality and the absolute, as we know. Freedom from attachment. So it's going to go back and talk about that, which is the fruit of fruition, added by the translator, consists of the truths of cessation and path, the third and fourth of the truths for noble ones. Accordingly, these should also be known by means of three qualities each, which I believe are given next: not being an object of conceptual investigation, being inexpressible, and only to be known by noble ones. These are transcendent aspects of transcendent knowledge. The Dharma is inconceivable. Since it is peace, it is free from the two veils and from thought. So this seems to be repeating the verse before. In its three aspects of purity and so on, it is similar to the sun. We saw the three aspects of being pure, clear, and playing the part of an antidote. Not exactly sure what he's getting at.
One interesting thing that's happening here is this combination of language that in some ways feels reminiscent of Madhyamaka, right? We start off with the famous Kachuskoti, the four extremes, the Dharma is free from all of those. But then speaking of it in positive terms, holding the brilliant light waves of primordial wisdom, that doesn't sound very Madhyamaka. So this is an interesting attempt at doing both.
The Chatushkoti, the song of the four-cornered problem, limitation. The Sangha, this mind, being by nature clear light, they have seen the poisons to be essenceless, and therefore truly realize the nature of every being as peace, the ultimate non-existence of a self. So again, as Chris is saying, we have a sort of madhyamaka presentation of selflessness they perceive, but then they perceive that the Buddha, perfect Buddha, pervades them all. They possess the understanding that is free from the veils, the two veils, thus seeing that beings are utterly pure and that this purity pervades their limitless number. They are endowed with the vision of primordial wisdom. I bow down to this Sangha. So seeing that beings are utterly pure and that this purity pervades their limitless number. It could be seen that beings are ultimately pure, that defilements are not truly existent. It's a little unclear. If you believe the translation, that's what it implies. The assembly of those who have understanding, so the assembly is the Sangha, and thus do not fall back, has unsurpassable qualities. So the stage of Sangha that does not fall back is defined as what stage of the path?
The eighth bhumi, right?
Eighth bhumi bodhisattva, no more falling back. They have unsurpassable qualities at that stage, since their vision of inner primordial wisdom. It's funny to say inner primordial wisdom, which knows correctly as well as completely, is the reference to the two aspects of omniscience. Omniscient knowledge. Omniscient knowledge knows correctly the true nature of phenomena, and it knows all phenomena completely. It knows completely the varieties or the multiplicity or the manifestations of phenomena. Their primordial wisdom that has those two aspects is pure, realizing beings in their state of peace. The noble ones know correctly, presumably like knowing that beings are actually never move from the state of peace, or it's a little unclear. The noble ones know correctly. Feel free to chime in, Chris. The noble ones know correctly, for the mind is by nature utterly pure. So defilements are not existent, and the pure mind is. And the poisons were always exhausted. So it's unclear whether we're talking about the noble ones, and their minds are by nature utterly pure, or if that's all beings. Their understanding, I'm a little skeptical on this translation, as you see.
Isn't this like, I mean, is this in a sense describing it as pure perception?
It seems to be. It's either like pure perception, let's see, in all things purely from that point of view, or it's identifying noble ones as being pure.
I think, yeah, I think my take on it after trying to figure this out was that they're talking about the noble ones having pure perception, essentially being able to see all beings as pure.
That is how the translators translate.
Yes. You're not sure whether it's accurate then.
Somehow I'm not convinced. Their understanding, presumably, they're referring to the noble ones, which realizes the noble as well as its ultimate condition. The ultimate true nature, presumably, sees that the state of omniscience is within all beings. Thus, the noble ones know completely. So here we have that pure vision extending to seeing that all beings are without defilement, are relations with them. Such realization is the vision. The background noise there when I flip the pages. Les, you couldn't hear it. All right. Thank you, Cynthia. Let's see. Such realization is the vision of wisdom that is self-aware wisdom. The very controversial idea of self-awareness. And in particular, not only like accepting self-awareness on a relative level, which is like the one thing of the Yogacara, but elevating self-awareness to being basically the level of primordial wisdom. It's a hallmark of the Tathagata tradition. This wisdom is pure since it sees the undefiled expanse, free from attachment and obstruction, because it sees the pure object of wisdom. The subject is pure. Their vision of primordial wisdom is pure. So it implies that pure primordial wisdom is the object, but I suspect it's more like seeing their vision from the point of view of primordial wisdom is pure and comes close to that of an unsurpassable bit of wisdom. So
this is quite a sangha, I must say. I mean, the standards to get into this sangha must be extraordinarily high.
That's the traditional version in the traditional classical Mahayanas, that the sangha that we take refuge in is not you and me, really. But the sangha that we take refuge in is bodhisattvas of the 8th Brahmi and above. Interestingly, it's a little bit elitist. So subsequently, it was expanded to include us. Robert.
So this self-aware quality is interesting because it definitely implies a self of sorts.
Well, there is, yeah, you'll see there's very definitely.
Right? So I guess that's the Tathagarbha, the Buddha nature.
Yeah, yeah. Even though we talked about
Buddha nature is aware of itself.
Yeah, even though we talked the page before on the ultimate non-existence of a self.
Right. But nonetheless, it's self-aware. So
well, when we say self-aware, it doesn't mean aware of a self. We should actually distinguish that here. This author will talk about the self later on in the way that you're getting at. But here, when they say self-aware, it's a type of awareness that perceives the perceiver, as well as the object of perception, if you can distinguish any object as separate from the perceiver. But when they say self-aware, it actually, the implication or the meaning of that is that there is nothing outside of the awareness.
We saw this in the section on the Buddha, the first Vajra point. Since it must be realized through self-awareness, it is not a realization due to extraneous conditions.
Right. The whole thing seems to be pointing at emptiness.
For sure, but emptiness, a slightly different understanding of emptiness than Nagarjuna.
But because there's some intelligence in it of sorts, or
some a little bit.
Yeah, like or I mean, realization, a cognition of I mean, it's like language isn't really doing the trick here anymore, but
well, that's why they then revert to analogies. We'll have we saw that last week, and we'll see that again this week. But there's very definitely an open willingness, an eagerness to express the positive side of Buddhahood, of ultimate reality, or the experienced side of that.
Just one note, you were talking about or questioning the way he says their vision of primordial wisdom, and also on the prior page where they say such realization is the vision of wisdom. I think what they really mean is that they're saying what is seen by wisdom.
Yes,
That's,
I agree.
if you sort of like, it's a weird construct the way they did it, but it's like the vision by wisdom, not of wisdom, in a sense.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I think it's a case too where the wisdom is both the perceiver and the perception. It's both subject and object.
Well, is there an object in this kind of in this kind of whatever we call it?
I mean, sure, we could say that notion's incomprehensible. You know, a subject can't be, it can't be both subject and object at the same time. But
But isn't the example that that's the place in the text that Cynthia is referring to, didn't it? It say they're have an object there of sentient beings. What was that sentence again?
Well, there were two that I was looking at, although there were probably more. The one that starts just at the last line of the prior page, such realization is the vision of wisdom that is self-aware. This wisdom is pure since it sees, again in parentheses, the undefiled expanse. So I'm not sure, seeing the expanse, is that seeing anything? Who knows? And then the next one was their vision of primordial wisdom, which again would be that which is seen by primordial wisdom is pure and nears unsurpassable Buddha wisdom. It doesn't really say they're seeing anything there. It's just saying they're seeing like Buddhas do, almost.
From the point of view, yeah. So that this wisdom is pure since it sees the undefiled expanse, which grammatically implies that the undefiled expanse is its object. But I think we have to understand that it's not a subject-object experience free from attachment and obstruction. Their vision, their primordial wisdom vision, let's say, is pure and approaches that of the unsurpassable Buddha wisdom. These noble ones of this 8th stage and above do not fall back, and therefore they are the refuge, the third refuge for all beings. The 3 refuges, there being the teacher, the teaching, and the disciples, leads to respective aspirations towards 3 vehicles, which is Shravaka, Pratyeka, Buddha, Bodhisattvas, and to 3 different activities of veneration, presumably applying to those 3 different vehicles. Viewing this, the refuge is shown as threefold. The Dharma will be abandoned and is of an unsteady nature. So the Dharma is impermanent. There's times where there's no Dharma, right? Where there's no Buddha, and the Dharma fades after a certain time. It is not the ultimate quality, therefore, in terms of taking a refuge. The Sangha still has some fear, even those 8th-stage bodhisattvas would have put down, still has fear. Thus, these 2 aspects of the 3 refuges, being the Dharma and the assembly of noble ones, do not represent the supreme refuge, which is constant and stable, i.e. the Buddha. In a true sense, only the Buddha is being's true refuge, since the great sage embodies the Dharmakaya. Embodies the Dharmakaya, is again awkward. It's like the Buddha is the Dharmakaya. And the assembly also reaches its ultimate goal when these qualities of Dharmakaya are attained. So they sort of merge all into the Dharmakaya, the Buddha. Their occurrence is rare being not frequent. That's for sure. They are free from defilement. They possess power. The 3rd quality, wisdom, compassion, power. They are the adornment of the world, the very best of humans, the adornment. They are sublime and they are unchanging. Thus, they are named rare and sublime. This is a famous phrase that appears all the time in the Tibetan tradition. In Tibetan, when we say Tashi Delik, the longer version of that Tibetan says Tashi Delik Punsum Sok, which means the 3 rare and supreme ones. Tashi Delik Punsum Sok is the 3 rare and supreme ones. The last four Vajra points, the virtuous three jewels, which are rare and sublime, arise from suchness bound up with pollution, from the one free from pollution and the qualities of unpolluted Buddhahood, and from the activity or deeds of that victor. So the arising or the manifestation or the experience of the first three jewels of Buddhahood, of that Buddha's Dharma or teachings, and of that Buddha's assembly of aspirants arise from the four last points, which are suchness bound up with pollution. So that's the element. The element has this incomprehensible quality of being suchness that is somehow affiliated with defilement. And the one free of pollution, enlightenment, from the qualities of that unpolluted Buddhahood, and from the deeds of the victor. So those are the remaining 4 points of the 7 points, right? This is the object of those who see the ultimate truth.
So I have a slightly different reading of this, Derek.
Sure.
Which is I take it to be that the virtuous three jewels, the three refuges, which are rare and sublime, those arise from suchness bound up with pollution from the one free from pollution, from the element. So that the first three have pollution mixed in with them, and then the fourth, the element, is the unpolluted one, from which the remaining three qualities emerge. So the fourth is, or sorry, the remaining, 5, 6, 7, remaining three qualities emerge, or not qualities, but the Vajra points. So the first three are the fourth point, the element, mixed with pollution. The last three are the elements without pollution.
I'm confused. How can you say that? You said the first three are the element bound up with pollution. So you're saying that the Buddha is bound up with pollution?
I think that is what is being implied here, and that the element is the pure form. And that may just be because I'm reading this through the lens of Sajjana, the second text. So maybe we can table this interpretation until we get to him.
Okay, that's cool to have an alternate reading on it, but it seems here that the three jewels arise from that. At least that's what this translation says. Anyway, let's see how this unpacks here and then later in the other text. This is the object of those who see the ultimate truth. It's unclear. This is the object of those who see the ultimate truth. The disposition of the three and rare and sublime ones, the three refuges, is the object of vision of those who see everything. So the disposition is the fourth, the element. Furthermore, these four aspects in the given order are inconceivable for the following reasons. So these four are inconceivable. The element, enlightenment, qualities, and activity are inconceivable. The Buddha element is both pure and yet has affliction. Enlightenment is not afflicted and yet is purified. Qualities are totally indivisible. And that translator adds, and yet unapparent. So the qualities can't be separated from the element, and yet they're not apparent in the state of sentient being. Activity is spontaneous, happens just unceasingly. Buddha activity happens based on the needs of beings and former aspirations coming together and capabilities being present, and yet happen without any thought. So these are the four incomprehensible qualities of the Buddha element of these last 4 points, which is really the Buddha element spread out into its details, constituting what. So these four constitute what must be realized, the element, realization, Buddhahood, its attributes, its qualities of wisdom, compassion, and power, and then the means to bring it about, which is the Buddha activity. Accordingly, the first is the cause to be purified. The element is the cause, and that needs to be purified to bring about the result, which the latter 3 points are the conditions that support that, which is a little bit odd that Buddhahood would be a condition. The fourth Vajra point, the element, the perfect Buddhakaya. So Buddhakaya being different than Dharmakaya linguistically, but having a similar implication, is all embracing. So here we have the famous 4 reasonings for why all beings possess the element. Buddha, the body, the manifestation or the embodiment of Buddhahood is all embracing, it's all encompassing, it has no limits. It's not, it pervades space equally. So it doesn't avoid defiled sentient beings. Suchness, ta, cannot be differentiated. It pervades everywhere without differentiation. And all beings have the disposition, all beings have this inclination towards enlightenment. And we'll see their rationales for these. Thus, they all of reality, the they is a little bit unclear, always have Buddha nature. Rob.
This disposition, that's the Gotra, right?
It is, yeah. So sometimes it's translated here as element, and then now it's disposition, which is an interesting translation.
So embedded in everything is awakening.
That's the idea, yeah. Well, it pervades everything equally without limitation. And
didn't the term Gotra like originally refer to your caste or sort of your potential?
It did. It did. That's why, yeah, in other courses, we've gone through this complexity between the difference between Gotra and Tathagata Garbha. Gotra had a very sort of relative level meaning of being a way of classifying different beings according to their potential. And there was the Shravaka Yana, the Pratyeka Buddha Yana, the Bodhisattva Yana. They were in the Lankavatara Sutra, in the early part of that sutra, which is the earliest historically part of that sutra, there's this presentation of these 5 gotras or families. And in addition to those 3, Shravaka, Pratyeka Buddha, and Bodhisattva, there's the doubtful family that it's unclear what their disposition is. Can they achieve enlightenment or not? And then there's a cutoff family of sentient beings who are not going to achieve enlightenment. And so then sometime later, we have the Lotus Sutra appears on the scene where the Buddha teaches that all of that was just skillful means, just to give people different, to inspire sentient beings to pursue the path. That some people would be attracted to the Shravaka path, some people the Bodhisattva path. And then it was, you can surmise, well, the sort of doubtful and cut off names were given in, what's the fancy terms for that? Appellations were given in order to push people towards one of those other paths, let's say. And the Buddha says, Ekayana, one yana, there's only one path, Bodhisattva yana to Buddhahood. All beings will become Buddhas. And those other things are just temporary situations. And that sort of leads into the presentation of the Buddha nature teachings in terms of the sort of pseudo-chronological order of the presentation of the Dharma in this world. So then he's going to give some commentary, or maybe a sangha is on this logic. The Buddha has said that all beings have Buddha nature. And there's a quote, which we don't have the reference for, but we have the quotation marks. Since Buddha wisdom is always present within the assembly of beings, and assembly is reminiscent of the Sangha, this undefiled nature is free from duality. This undefiled nature is not, doesn't decide upon, like I'm going to inhabit tall people and not short people, or round people and not square people, or dogs but not cats. Although I don't know. No. Let's see. And since the disposition to Buddhahood has been named after its fruit, Tathagata Garbha is named after apples. Tathagatas. Essence, cause, fruit, function, endowment, manifestation. Phases, all pervasiveness of suchness, unchangingness, and separability of the qualities. So this list, we have this list of 10 terms, which Sajjana will massage for us, and these should be understood as intended to describe the meaning of the absolute expanse, these 10 qualities of the absolute expanse, presumably the absolute expanse being Dharmakaya or Shunyata, Tathagata. Then we have the start of some analogies, just like a jewel. The sky and water are pure. It is by nature always free from the poisons. From devotion to the Dharma, from highest wisdom, and from samadhi and compassion, its realization arises. So these are said to be the 4 causes. And 3, jewel, sky, and water are the 3 analogies of its qualities, of the element. We're in the 4th point, the element. Wielding power, not changing into something. So wielding power is the jewel, not changing into something else. It's the sky. And being or possessing a nature, being a nature that has a moistening quality, or being of a nature, the nature of moistening. Those 3 analogies or objects, jewel, sky, water, have properties corresponding to those of our precious gems, sky, and water. So these qualities of the element, enmity towards the Dharma, of you asserting an existing self, fear of samsara, suffering, and neglect of the welfare of fellow beings are the 4 veils of faith. Great desire. So those who are overcome with desire have these 4 downfalls, as well as Tirthakas, Shravakas, and Pratyeka Buddhists possess these 4 veils to some limited extent. Obviously, the Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhists. The cause that purifies all these veils consists of the 4 qualities of the path, which are same thing, devotion, just mentioned them. So devotion to the Dharma, highest wisdom, samadhi, and compassion. Those whose seed is devotion to the supreme vehicle. So we have them again here. Thank you. Whose seed is devotion towards the supreme vehicle, whose mother, the Prajnaparamita, the transcendent mother, is analytical wisdom. Analytical wisdom, active wisdom, generating the Buddha qualities, whose abode is the blissful womb of meditative stability, and whose nurse is compassion, are heirs born to succeed the Muni. And the Muni is another epithet of the Buddha. Robert.
Question, analytical wisdom. Are we talking about Vipassana here?
No, I'm pretty sure it's a translation of discriminating, what we would call discriminating wisdom, which is like a translation of Prajnaparamita, Prajna. And so this vibe of like analytical wisdom versus non-analytical wisdom sort of takes on a different significance later in the history of Buddhism. uh, earlier on at this phase, it's understood that discriminating awareness wisdom goes from a non-conceptual to a non, goes from a conceptual to a non-conceptual phase necessarily. So it doesn't really mean like, oh, analytical wisdom as opposed to non-analytical wisdom or primordial wisdom. But it's an interesting term, and it comes up all the times, and you'll see it. Even Trump Rinpoche uses it, individually discriminating wisdom, or individually investigating wisdom. I've yet to find anybody like that who discusses it that well. As Carl addresses it a little bit in one of his many footnotes. But anyway, fruit is the perfection of the qualities of purity, self, happiness, and permanence. Whoa, we just shifted into a different dimension. The Madhyamaka bells are going off, the red lights. Weariness of suffering, longing to attain peace, and devotion towards this aim are the function of the element. We're talking about the element here. The fruit of the element is perfect purity, perfect self, perfect happiness, and perfect permanence. The next stanza, in brief, the fruit of these purifying causes fully divides into the remedies for the antidotes, which in their turn counteract the four aspects of wrong beliefs with regard to the Dharmakaya. Deserves to be unpacked, but we don't really have time. So let me do a little bit more, because this section is pretty important. The Dharmakaya is purity, since its nature is pure, and even the remaining imprints are fully removed. It is true self, since all conceptual elaboration in terms of self and non-self is totally stilled. It is true happiness, since even the aggregates of mental nature and their causes are reversed. It is permanence, since the cycle of existence and the state beyond pain are realized as one. Their analytical wisdom has cut off all self-cherishing, without exception. Yet cherishing beings, those possessed of compassion, do not adhere to peace, relying on understanding, compassionate love, the means to enlightenment. Noble ones will neither abide in samsara nor in a limited nirvana. If the Buddha element were not present, there would be no remorse over suffering. So how do they think about the Buddha element? The Buddha element is that which is repelled by suffering. There would be no longing for nirvana. So the Buddha element is that which understands suffering and longs for non-suffering and strives. There would be no striving or devotion towards this aim, that with regard to existence and nirvana, their respective fault and quality are seen. That suffering is seen as the fault of existence, and happiness as the quality of nirvana stems from the presence of the disposition to Buddhahood. Why so? In those who are devoid of disposition, such seeing does not occur. So here we have this notion, oh, some don't have this disposition, which is a little bit odd, and they don't have that. So I'll pause there, and without time to go through the rest of the text, which was amazing, boy, but let's shift over to this other amazing by a gentleman named Sajjan. Chris, take it away, please.
Thanks. So as referenced earlier, this text is somewhat special because while there are many commentaries on the Uttara Tantra within Tibet, this is one of two that we have from India, and one of the only one that we have available in English. It is, as I'm sure we all encountered, extremely difficult, very dense, and sort of just like a map of how all of the how a variety of different numbered schemes and how they all match up with each other. And then somewhat confusingly, it's not just a sort of summary of the Uttara Tantra, but he's really presenting, he's reworking it into his own scheme here. So I don't really think we have time to go through it in a huge amount of depth, since there's just so much crammed in here. So I just wanted to give a couple little breadcrumbs from the feast that this text is. And the first point is that this is really a practice manual, rather than a philosophical text or a treatise explaining the view of the Tathagata. This is a sort of a how-to guide, and in particular, a how-to guide that is mapped onto the various stages of the path. So the seven Vajra points that we just encountered, those actually become different things that are practiced at different stages in the path. The most important point to be made philosophically, I think, is that the all seven of the Vajrapadas, the Vajra points, are expressions of one single nature, which is the fourth point, what he calls the Dhatu or the Gotra, what we were just referring to as the element. This is revealed gradually. So one thing that we encountered last week in the Tathagata similes was a question about whether Tathagata was a gradual thing, as in the simile of the seed that grows into a large tree, or whether it was sort of a dynamic presentation, or whether it was static, like the case of the gold statue that's encased in the clay mold, not changing but hidden. In this case, we have a presentation that shows it somewhat as both. The Buddha element is it is permanent, but it is gradually revealed along the path. So let me just pull up some notes. The path begins. So what's the first stage in terms of the five stages? Which is the first one? Anyone?
Are we talking paths here?
We're talking paths here.
So path of what is it, accumulation?
Yeah, the path of accumulation. So in this case, the practitioner relies on the first three of the Vajra points, the three refuges, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And at this point, these are seen as external, not as part of the practitioner's self, but engaged as external causes of their progress on the path. What happens then is on the second stage. So what's the second path?
Joining?
Yeah, joining or sometimes unification.
Preparation.
On that, so Sajjana separates that into three different stages. The path leading to liberation, the path leading to penetration, and the path of immediate succession. So these are all part of the path of unification, and those take for their support the fifth, sixth, and seventh Vajrapada, the awakening, the qualities, and the activity. Awakening, Buddha qualities, and activity. Those are taken as the support of the path of unification. But interestingly, they're not taken. So those three qualities, of course, are thought of as manifestations of the Buddha's enlightenment. In this case, they aren't realized internally as manifestations, but are taken conceptually as supports. So,
Where are you in the text, please?
where are we in the text? I will tell you where we are in the text. We're going to be on page 64 of the source, verses 6c and 7. Yeah. So here we have the last three Vajrapadas as soteriological foundations. This is page 357 of the source book. He who treads the path of liberation, the path leading to penetration, and the path of immediate succession. So these are those three stages of the second path of unification, right? Directly
first three of the four stages of the second path.
Which is the fourth?
Supreme Dharma.
Hmm. Okay.
It's hard to correlate these, but sorry. Anyway, sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah. Okay. Directly approaches the attendant conditions, that is, the awakening, Buddha qualities, and Buddha activities. So we're approaching those conditions. What he then goes on to say, this is a lot in a short paragraph. He then goes on to say that after one then realizes the path of seeing, this is sort of implied, after one has gone through these stages, one then resorts to the 10 topics of the element and should engage in reflection and cultivation. So then this is what is done on the fourth path of meditation, leading to the fifth path of no more learning. First, reflection, chinta, and then cultivation, bhavana. So
Just a quick question. Is
yeah.
that in the threesome of hearing, contemplating, and meditating?
Mhm.
Are those in fact the same as the second two, or is this different in any way? I'm just was kind of wondering that as I looked at this.
Yeah, I think that would be a fair way to look at it, that conceptual understanding has to precede direct non-conceptual realization.
So there's a chart on page 358 of the source book,
Right.
table, and it has the 7 Vajrapadas, and the second column gives hearing, contemplating, meditating, and the corresponding stages. And Darshana Marga is the path of seeing. If that helps.
Can you and the Vajrapada, the Ratnatraya, is that the element?
Yes, that's the element.
Yeah, so once you've trained the inflection point, the pivot point, the path of seeing is when the element is directly perceived. So it's not taken as a conceptual support, as is the case in the first two paths, but it is then directly perceived and then sort of integrated through the first path, until its complete realization on the fifth.
I'm very sorry.
Yeah.
Ratnatraya is the 3 jewels.
Mm.
Right, and so Bodhi, Guna, and Karman are enlightenment, qualities, and activity, and Dhatu is the element, and the Ratnatraya is the 3 jewels.
So that's kind of upside down or reverse order of the way that we've been going through them, right? Or actually, I guess maybe do you sort of read this from the bottom to the top, that like is moksha bhagya or whatever that top right, or is that actually liberation?
Those terms, moksha bhagya and Veda bhagya, liberation. I'm not sure exactly the implication of bhagya. Nirveda is like immersion or emerging from. Chinta relates to the moksha bhagya and Veda bhagya passing bhavana to darshana maga.
I guess we essentially need is this Sanskrit translations of everything?
Yeah, it seems like moksha bhagya and Nirveda bhagya are stages of the path, the second path, and that darshana maga would be. Darshana maga is usually the path of
So it is.
darshana, but I was totally confused by the affiliation of this to the paths. So I shouldn't have interrupted you. You seem to have it down. But keep going.
Well, I don't know if I have it down.
You have one version of it.
Yeah, I've got, yeah, and you make of it what you will. So the next thing that happens, and maybe why we're seeing the three jewels showing up in the bhavana phase, is that on the eighth bhumi, the eighth, ninth, and 10th bhumi, the three jewels are said to be realized no longer as conceptual external causes of enlightenment, but as internal causes. So on the eighth bhumi, the practitioner realizes themselves as a Buddha, on the ninth as the Dharma, and on the 10th as the Sangha. Or perhaps more directly, not the practitioner that realizes it, but the element is uncovered to the extent that it manifests as the Buddha, the Dharma, and then the Sangha. And then finally, on the path of no more learning. So these are still all said to be somewhat corrupted, impure forms. And then on the path of no more learning, the dhatu completely becomes the full version of the three jewels, as well as awakening qualities and activity. So this is incredibly complicated, as no doubt we're all experiencing. But I think the interesting point is the mapping of what is a sort of poetic and philosophical text onto a path, and in making this, and in a way that feels very sophisticated and robust. I don't know if anyone had a chance to read the nine similes mapped onto the path that Derek sent out. That did not have nearly the sort of sophistication of this system. So I found this provocative, difficult, and sort of interesting as something that one might spend some time with. Okay, so the Buddha nature is the what, and then what is the how? How do we take the show on the road with us? And that's Sajjana's project here, is to help practitioners realize this on a path level. Derek, did you have any points you wanted to make about this? I mean, we could kind of pick out different other things, but I think that's the main thrust of it for me is mapping this onto the five paths and the bhumis. Rob.
I don't recall. I think I heard it in this class, but it's my understanding that the very first inspiration for any practitioner at the very beginning actually comes from the Tathagarbha, from Buddha nature. That first yearning for a teacher, and for losing ignorance. That inspiration that's not ego.
That was the point that the first text was making at the end there, that the disposition is what makes us give rise to the thought of maybe there's a way of transforming my mind. That's what gives rise to dissatisfaction with samsara, dissatisfaction with the possibilities that samsara offers.
Yeah, the metaphor that comes to mind is like a chick hatching out of an egg. You know, sort
In
of.
what way?
Well,
Oh, pecking at it, right?
yeah, pecking from the inside out.
That's neat.
You know,
I decided to test that age-old quandary of which came first, the chicken or the egg, and I ordered both a chicken and an egg from Amazon at the same time. So I'll let you know which comes first, okay? Just kidding, little comic relief here. Mary Beth for Christmas.
I'm just kind of wondering the way that this sajjana is mapping out the Tathagata Garbha teachings onto the path is maybe a little different than how the Madhyamikas or how that gets sort of laid out onto the path. Am I sort of right to see it that way? This is like an alternate way of looking at how the path can be explained.
It shares certain broad contours, right? The third path is, the big inflection point. The first two are sort of to get you there, and then the last two are to integrate it. So there's a structural similarity, but I think that it is a fairly unique presentation.
Is it because it's from the perspective of like thinking about Buddha nature versus thinking about emptiness?
I think the Tathagata folks wouldn't distinguish between the two.
Would the emptiness folks distinguish between the two?
Yeah, and this is really the debate that plays out in Tibet over the next century or so of, or sorry, next millennium or so of, is there a contradiction between emptiness and Tathagata? So on one side of the debate, Tathagata is seen as positive qualities that don't withstand the analysis of Madhyamaka. And then on the other side of the debate, Tathagata is sort of the non-dual qualities that are untouched by the Madhyamaka's destruction of dualistic thinking.
Do we look at this, maybe understand this better when we start talking about the Shentong and Rongtong? Is that
Yeah,
kind of
so
like
the first was Ramtong and the second was Shentong. And the Tathagata texts, such as this one, really form the philosophical backbone of the Shentong.
okay?
But it should be said, and we're going to get into this at length, that the Shentong view themselves of including and transcending the Rangtong. They don't think there's similar to the way the Mahayana think of themselves as including and transcending the Sravakayana. The Zhentongpas see themselves as including and transcending the Rangtongpas.
Thanks. That's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
I had a couple of questions for you from the footnotes. And And starting with on page 350 on the bottom of our source book, note 9, which is in his introduction, this author's introduction, who is Kazuo Kano, I guess Japanese. It says, as for an evaluation of Karl Brunholzl's translation in his book When the Clouds Part, which was done based on my earlier unpublished annotated translation. So in that book, Karl gives a translation of this text by Sajin. And I was ready to use that. And Chris found this other article because he kept researching for other sources and discovered that according to Kazuo Kano, Karl's translation is flawed because he used a flawed transcription of this text that was done based on the early rough photographs or whatever of the text. So I found that interesting. So just to sort of like gives you a little bit of pause when you read these translated texts of like how accurate, how confident are we of the accuracy of these texts that I'm reading, you know, and it's like this is one of the main things that we do in studying the Dharma is like not just accepting what we hear, what we read as being as being the truth, you know, and applying our analytical understanding of this. Does it agree with other things I read? Does it sound right? Does it seem right? How authoritative is it? You know, we have to weigh all these things. And that's what the Buddha talks about in his 4 reliances. You know, just because it's from Karl Brunholz, who's like an amazing being, you know, doesn't mean that it's. So that was sort of an interesting shock for me when Chris produced this one.
Well, it was actually a bit of a bigger scandal than that. Of this author actually accuses Karl Brunholz of publishing his draft manuscript as Karl Brunholz's own translation. He says, you know, not only is his translation inaccurate, it's inaccurate because it's based on my draft that I hadn't finished editing. So, yeah, I think Eric's point is well made. You know, don't have any heroes.
Don't have any assailable heroes or heroes that you're not willing to like consider as maybe not always without fault.
Right. Unless they're 8th Bhumi Bodhisattvas.
Right. On the other hand, I liked Karl's summation of the different, you know, sort of the outline of the text, which was the
yeah. I had a piece of that I would like to read if that's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
I thought was really clear.
I need to find these other 2 notes that I wanted to ask you about, so go for that.
So this is going to be on page 373, I think the last page in our source book. In sum, by combining what is said in the Uttara Tantra and I can't remember what that other text is. Sajjana presents a single continual soteriological system of revealing the unconditioned and luminous Tathagata heart, Vajra 4, by shedding its adventitious stains through the 6 conditions of the first 3 and last 3 Vajra points. The first 3 Vajra points, the 3 jewels, are the conditions that motivate one to generate bodhicitta and gather the accumulation of merit and wisdom up through the 7th bhumi, while they also represent results that are attained on the 8th, 9th, and 10th bhumis, respectively, right? That was when we talked about on those bhumis, one becomes Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. The last 3 Vajra points are the conditions for attaining the final fruition up through the 10th bhumi, while they also represent the instantaneous final result of the 11th bhumi. In this way, Sajjana describes these 6 Vajra points as having the double function of being conditions extrinsic to the Tathagata heart on the lower levels of the path, someone else who is a Buddha, his teachings, and his Sangha, as well as his awakened qualities and enlightened activities, and being results intrinsic to the Tathagata heart on the higher levels, one's own Tathagata heart manifesting as the three jewels, awakening its qualities and its enlightened activities. It seems the double function of the six Vajra points in Sajjana's presentation, in connection with the differences in the Uttara Tantra various verses, like Naglat Sawa to speak of two cycles in terms of the causal relationships between the seven Vajra points. According to Sajjana's this text we just read, the process through which the Tathagata heart is revealed is primarily contained in the fourth Vajra point, because this process consists of contemplating its threefold nature, the Dharmakaya, suchness, and the disposition, as the basis, which is deepened through the 10 topics, the 9 examples, and the multiple correlations between these three sets. So I thought that was a nice summary of what's going on here, and in particular, the way the higher levels function as extrinsic inspirations on the lower path, and then become intrinsic on the higher path, as well as the lower points doing the same. Cynthia.
So that's great. I like it. I'm curious whether, in terms of the Sajjana text overall, as you mentioned, that his emphasis really was on it as practice. And so I wondered, do we feel like you could piece together that path of practice that he is recommending based on this text? Do you think that he's sort of has laid it all out, or whether you would need more other sources to do that? I'm just curious.
You know, I think this is probably a text that was intended, and he refers to it as pith instructions. So I think this was intended as maybe sort of a outline or cheat sheet for someone, a teacher who is drawing on a wide variety of texts and oral instructions, a way to structure those and systematize them. Is it a complete text that's usable by itself? I certainly didn't find it that way. But it is an interesting attempt at systematization.
And so, of course, my next question would be, do either of you have any thoughts of other related texts or things where anyone has actually done what you just described, of taking it and putting it together into a practice manual, so to speak? Have you encountered that in your reading?
I'll let Derek answer that one.
Oh, you do a lot of reading too.
Well, for me, the answer is not as far as I know, or not in a way that is at least as explicit. Of I'm taking the Uttara Tantra and forming it into a path. I do think that this style of thinking in which the Buddha nature becomes a germ that either that is in one way of thinking grows and in another way of thinking is uncovered. I think that becomes pretty emblematic of the way the path is presented in much of the Tibetan discourse. But I'd be curious to get Derek's thoughts on this question.
No, I've never done what Cynthia's asking. For simple.
I have to admit, there was sort of a bit of inspiration, because of the fact that it was it was pointing to a path of practice as opposed to just, conceptual.
It's impossible to figure out what that path is, what that practice might be.
I was curious about it. I was just wondering, because I was thinking like this would be cool. I mean, I imagine you could put some of it together, but.
So on page 356, there's footnote 30. According to this gloss, Buddha Dharma song respectively correspond to Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, Nirmanakaya. We've seen that in other places. The expression conventional three jewels refers to the three jewels for beginners. This contrasts to the ultimate, which in turn are attained respectively at the 8th, 9th, and 10th stages, which you just spoke about also, Chris. And this idea that one attains these 3 kayas before the 11th bhumi is a really strange idea. I've never seen that idea anywhere else. My understanding is that those are attained either simultaneously on the 11th bhumi, according to some Mahayana traditions, or attained on what are then extrapolated into 11, 12, and 13th bhumis, starting with Dharmakaya and then one realizes Sambodhikaya. And then on page 357.
Can I just respond to that real quick before?
Yeah, please.
On the previous page, at the top of 355, in the interlinear gloss, right, which is by another anonymous author, right? So this isn't by Sajjana. This is somebody else's notes that were written in the margins, I guess. It is called impurity because one attains the 3 jewels at the stages from the 8th up to the 10th. Purity refers to the awakening Buddha qualities and activities which are attained at the 11th stage. So it's not as though one becomes a perfectly pure Buddha on the 8th bhumi, realizes perfectly pure Dharma on the 9th and the perfectly pure Sangha on the 10th. These are still somewhat impure, and then on the 11th are attained in their purity all at once.
I'm not totally convinced of that, but it's fascinating. That is very cool. So then on 357, in note 36, he says 3 sentences in, he says, the causal clause shows that the swabhava of an ordinary being differs from that of an Arya. Swabhava, that's the enemy. Swabhava here is not in an ultimate nature, but rather a blah, blah. Like the heat of fire, like the quality of a being. That was fascinating to see that term being used.
Yeah, I noticed that one too. I thought it was kind of an interesting distinction that essentially they're saying that for ordinary people, svabhava is like that, just that the kind of characteristics type of thing.
And then in footnote 38, the practitioner abiding at the moksha bhagya takes awakening as condition when abiding in the nirveda bhagya takes Buddha qualities. So the 5th, 6th, and then 7th point, the one abiding in Antara Marga takes the Buddha activities as conditions. And these are conditions for attaining the 3 jewels. Got to figure out what these paths are, the moksha bhagya and so forth, what their normal usage is, so understand what he's using them as. And the bottom of the page,
those I believe are those 3 stages of the path of unification.
Well, the path of unification has 4 stages. Traditionally, there's heat, patience, emergence, and ultimate supreme dharma.
Here's the translations I have of these: the moksha bhavigya, the path leading to liberation; the nirveda bhavigya, the path leading to penetration; and the
right.
Anatara Marga, the path of immediate succession.
Yeah, those are the translations, but the meaning is unclear. And it's Anantara Marga is different than the Darshana Marga that we saw earlier, which is the path of seeing.
Mm-hmm. These are the things that lead immediately to the Darshana Marga.
Right. So they are on the second path. So below that, on 40 in the middle, note 40, the 3 aspects of Buddha nature. So this has come up before in this text and the prior text, that basically there's Buddha nature is like extrapolated into these 3 qualities: Dharmakaya, Tatata, and Gotra. And that didn't quite become crystal clear to me, as those are 3 qualities of Buddha nature, until I saw it in this text laid out in that. And then on page 358, going back to above that table, the author in his footnote says, however, it's not clear to me exactly what stages are being alluded to by the words Chinta and Bhava. He correlates them as he gave in the chart below that we saw before. But interesting, like all these different ways of using these schemes. Fun with schemes and lists is endless in the Buddhist tradition.
Another interesting thing,
opportunity
to this point about the challenge of interpreting these texts is that in Carl's analysis, he gives three different sort of synopsises. His own, this author Kazuo Kano, and there's a third one, Takasaki. Three different outlines of Sajjana's text, and then in Kazuo Kano's his text, he has a different version of an outline that sort of resembles the one Carl provides, but is a little more detailed. So, even among different translations, different translators have completely different ways of interpreting and breaking up the structure of this text.
Yeah, it is fascinating. It'd be neat if we had Sajjana come here and explain it to this text.
I was just thinking we need some time travel here.
Yeah.
We need to bring one of the.
Oh, you guys got it all wrong. It's blah, 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 blah. Grimmel's outline, Kado's outline, Takasaki's outline. Yeah, anyway, what a wonderful way to conclude our course. And that we should do. So thank you all very much for joining us on this second stage of our exploration, sort of finishing up the trajectory of this development in India. And taking a break now from this intense philosophical investigation. For the next course, we'll do a meditation text, as you know, and give Chris a little time off to recover and prepare for the next two segments of this course that will start up in the fall, breaking up the Tibetan tradition in some as yet to be seen way. So it's a bit of like a challenge to try to make like a deep dive into so many different authors and so many different texts and traditions. But hopefully it's not a total blur, and we got some taste of these that will provide us a good foundation for the subsequent development that goes on in Tibet. Chris, you want to say any final words for us, please?
Well, first, an enormous amount of gratitude to you, Derek, for inviting me to embark on this crazy project with you. That started off as we were going to do like a brief summer class, and then somehow has evolved into like 6 months of weekly deep dives on the greatest hits of the Buddhist philosophy in India and Tibet. So. It's been sort of a wild ride for me, and an incredible opportunity and growing experience to grow as a teacher, and appreciate all of the confidence that all of you have placed in me as well. So thank you for that. And I just think it's so much fun to kind of swim in these waters, even as sort of unfamiliar as they are. And odd, such as this last text, very odd. But an opportunity to, think deeply. So many of us get into this and we're, attracted to a charismatic teacher or to the smell of incense, or, meditation makes us feel a little less crazy. And it's really, I found it really enriching to sort of dive into the meat of how this tradition has tried to understand itself and made sense of these practices over the millennia. People so different from us living in places so not only geographically but chronologically removed from our situation, and then finding something somehow relatable to it. So I've found that really enjoyable, and especially these moments of friction of madhyamikas over here and yogacaras over here, and how do we square that circle? How do we make these two things fit together, or don't we? Really ripe and doing that sort of analysis, that sort of dialectic, can really clarify, like, okay, but how do I feel? What is my experience? So I've really enjoyed this as a practice and as an education, and been really grateful to do it alongside all of you. So thank you.
Thank you, Chris. It's been really great having you do it with us. You bring such an incredible capability of analyzing and opening up, explaining these teachings, and great at researching, finding sources and different articles and so forth. So really grateful, fun doing it with you. Thank you, everyone, so much for joining us, and hope to see you again soon. Chris, you want to lead the dedication?
Yeah, sure. Before I go on vacation. By this merit, may all attain omniscience, may it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great east, may the lotus garden of the Rigden's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Take
everyone.
care. Be well. See you soon. Recording stopped.